All right, it's time to slow down a little bit, stop scrolling for a little bit. Let's just have a rant and a quick thought. Well, maybe not so quick. I think this thing's like 25 minutes, but let's have a quick thought about not villainizing and not lionizing any supposed heroes that we might have in media, whether that's social media, pop media, pop culture, whatever. I feel like there's a lot of issues around this, and I have some thoughts that, I think have helped me, and hopefully they'll help you. And I think if you approach it in this perspective, it's going to teach you something about yourself and give you a direction that will yield some fruit in whatever journey you're on. So without further ado, here's the rant. In the light of one of the most prominent self-help, biohacker, productivity guru type people having a pretty big scandal come out today, I want to talk about productivity and self-improvement and all this type of stuff in a more conservative and sustainable perspective. And when I say conservative, I don't mean right wing or some political thing. I just mean that a lot of people tend to take this self-help, and a lot of people, that includes me, take these lessons that we learn from all these productivity YouTubers or self-help gurus or, whatever it might be, anyone in that space, and we tend to take it to the nth degree. It's like someone trying out a new diet, right? Or they started working out this week or something. You can't get them to shut up about it. And that's me too. That's everybody. I'm not talking down to those people. I think what it is we just get really excited about something and we tend to take it a little too far. And that, I think we all kind of do that. Is it annoying? Yeah. Could we maybe do a little better and self-regulate before we go out and try to proselytize for this new cause that we learned about a minute ago? Probably. Are we going to? Maybe. But I think, enough of these, and I'm keeping this purposefully vague. Like, I don't want to out the person and start beef or something. I think that, I don't know, unless you know what's going on personally. If you do, then by all means, come forward and speak your story and all that. We don't want to allow these things to happen. But I've kind of learned in the past to, if I'm not directly involved in this, I just kind of stay out of it, for better or for worse. Maybe that's not something I should do. I don't know. Anyways, where was I going with that before I started qualifying my perspective here, or my opinion? I'm keeping this purposefully vague because this is not the first time we've seen a story like this. Pretty much any person that is prominent in a space has less than savory details come out about them. And that can kind of be taken two ways, right? One way is that anyone that is ambitious enough to achieve any level of prestige in their industry probably has a complex where they are doing that in other parts of their lives. And usually men, where this manifests is in less than ideal actions with women. It's a terrible thing. And it's more common than would be ideal. Ideally, we don't want to see this at all, but it happens all the time. The other way that we could look at this is everyone has their faults. And I think this is the healthier way to look at it. It's easy to look at people and villainize them, villainize ambition and success, and use that as an excuse to not become whoever you can be in your fullest capacity of being human. Should they be villainized? Maybe. Is it healthy to villainize people that we don't really know much about? I don't think so. So I'm not thinking about the justice of the situation right now. I'm just thinking about it from a practical point of view, trying to help the listener here. I don't think it's not healthy and it's not productive for the individual to villainize everyone that they see that's ambitious out there. It's just not a good mind state to be in. I think the healthier way to view this is, we've all got our flaws, and whether that is, detestable behavior with the opposite sex, whether that's drugs or, all the terrible things that humanity is capable of, whatever it is, we're all kind of flawed. And obviously, going along with that, nobody's perfect. So I think the healthier way to go about this is to just simply not idolize anyone out there. And it's really hard, right? Like, we want to, or at least I have the natural tendency to find someone that seems like they have their stuff together and go, hey, I'm going to follow this person. They seem like they got it together. They do this, I'm going to do this. They have this perspective, I'm going to have this perspective. And that's not really a healthy thing to do, but it's a proclivity that I definitely have. And I think a lot of people have that same proclivity. And I think the thing that could benefit us all is just, let's not idolize everyone, and let's not make people to be out saints and villains and all that. And that kind of comes back to, like, we don't know these people, that probably for the worst. I was going to say for better or for worse, but I think it's for the worst. It's hard to tell what's true nowadays. We have the media that makes up stories on both sides. And I know that whole both sides is bad. And I don't want to make this into a political thing, but I think it's safe to say that the media in general is not super reliable. We have AI that's, becoming harder and harder to distinguish what is AI derived and what is human derived. Everything is becoming increasingly disconnected. People aren't face to face as much. I don't know about you, but my time with my friends, it might just be the stage of life that I'm in, but it's way less than it used to be, especially face to face. Even family, I don't see that often. And that's partially because, my family has its own issues and all that too. But it's hard to tell what's true. And I think that's always been a challenge, but I think especially now, with all those things that I just outlined, that it's increasingly hard to do. And it kind of sucks because it feels like you don't know what's real anymore and you don't know how to judge things. But I think any challenge, you can view it as a positive or a negative, right? And some people I've been listening to in like the spiritual space recently have made an interesting point of, if you are spiritually inclined, you would love to go out and be a monk somewhere and just isolate and meditate all day, find a cave and just meditate it up and ascend into enlightenment and all that. And that sounds awesome, right? And the reason that sounds awesome is because you don't have anything to worry about, really. You don't have to go to a job. You don't have to take care of your family. You don't have all these obligations. You just have to kind of take care of yourself. And yeah, maybe you help clean up the monastery and you have chores and stuff, but you don't really have to think about anything. It's all kind of taken care of you. And you just kind of do your chores, and then you sit there and you think, or you try not to think and you try to be, or whatever your objective at that moment is. But it's a much easier life in a lot of ways. And some people look at that and they're like, not for me. That sounds pretty hellish. I don't want to be isolated on my own and sit in a cave. And those are probably healthier people. But for people like me, the whole allure of like the monk lifestyle sounds pretty awesome. But I don't do it because I have people I care about, and I have like a life, and there's a lot of things in that life I wish could be better. But being in less than ideal circumstances, like pretty much all of us probably are listening to this, there's challenges every day. The biggest challenge isn't sweeping the hallway of the monastery or helping serve food to other monks. Your biggest challenge is probably some scary family drama, or some relationship drama, or some work drama, or any number of things that, just making enough to live, to pay rent and food, and maybe it's some health thing. All of these are much more trying than pretty much anything you're going to see in a monastery until you're maybe at like end of life, but then you have a whole community to care for you too. I mean, I don't know. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is the day-to-day is much less planned out. It's much more dynamic and much more challenging for someone who's not in that ideal monk life or whatever it might be. And I think the natural reaction to that is to say, this sucks. I want that monk life. I want to naturally just be able to be and have no distractions, and that it's a very idyllic lifestyle that you could cling to. But this less than ideal lifestyle, like we're all living, much like this less than ideal media landscape, and trying to decipher what's true and what's not, and trying to look at these people that are in the media and people want to either idolize or villainize. Yes, it's not ideal, but is that what we really want? Just because it's not ideal doesn't mean it's not great, and it's not, like, I would say optimal, For spiritual growth, you kind of need something to grow against. I would argue that it's much harder to become some flavor of enlightened if you are holding down a job, you have a family, you have obligations, you have, all this stuff you have to worry about, and you have to somehow rise above it all to a state of enlightenment where you can be a great person, not necessarily like a famous person, but just like a great person to those around you, and become a better person every day and do all that while you deal with all this drama of just day-to-day life. I think if you're looking to be truly spiritually enlightened, it's easy to think if you're living that monk life that you're enlightened, but as soon as you step out into the real world and you have these terrible problems that we have to all deal with on the day-to-day, it's going to be much harder to stay in that enlightened state. And I would argue that I don't know if you could say you're truly enlightened until you are faced with those really ugly day-to-day problems, and you can rise above it, and you can have the perspective of someone who is ascended a little bit, you know? So with all of these podcasters or music, movie stars, whatever, anyone in a prominent place, especially in this self-help space, I feel like there's a bit of truth on both sides, where the people that are in those high places, a lot of times they are very ambitious, high achievers, and that kind of goes hand in hand with being maybe a little bit self-driven to the point where it's unhealthy, whether that's narcissism or something else, I don't know. But I think a lot of those people have a very unhealthy relationship with status. And then, the other side of the coin is nobody's perfect. And I think the takeaway from all of this is let's not idolize anyone. Let's not really demonize anyone either. And unless, you have some personal relationship with them, then, you might have a little more insight. But even then, I think of people that I'm really close with that I've known that have done bad things. And some of those people I'm not close with anymore because I know the things that they did and I couldn't continue being close with them. But I don't know if I would say that I knew them close enough to villainize them, I think it's important to just understand that we're all a mix of good and bad, and I think it's a challenge every day to rise against the badness and triumph with the goodness. And one of probably the most toxic people that takes this whole let's stay conservative with self-improvement. This is probably the last person that I should quote, but David Goggins, the SEAL guy that is just totally way to one side of the equation. He says you're never effing good, and I'll try to keep this pretty family friendly podcast. It's not my goal to be all edgy and stuff, so I'll probably try to not swear too much on this, but a lot of people like to think that, once they get to a certain level or whatever, then they're good. Then they can relax and it can be easy. There's a cross trainer coach that was talking about somebody in the crowd watching a cross trainer workout, and they're like, man, I want to be like that because it would be easy to do these things. And it's no, it's not easy to do this. You really have to wake up every day. And that whole Native American story about feeding the good wolf or the bad wolf or whatever, I forget whatever it is, but really it's the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, and they're always there, and you always have to decide. It's never the devil never goes away. You always have to make that conscious choice and action to move to the side of good. And nobody's perfect, man. People trip up, people falter. Even if people are really good in one area of life, they're probably lacking in another. And I think to villainize these people, it's a thing that we do to make ourselves more comfortable with who we are. If we haven't done that thing that comes out about this person who's otherwise successful or whatever, then we can look at that and go, hey, I'm not at this level, but at least I didn't do that, And it's all a performance of the ego. to make us feel like we're somehow better than that other person. And in that aspect, we are, but we don't know that other person. We don't know what they've been through. And I'm sure if you look at yourself, there's a lot of things that you could improve on as well. So I'm not trying to defend misogyny or all the terrible things that people do. Those things are terrible. There's no argument there. And I don't want to argue against that. I don't want to say that it's okay to do these things that are terrible. That is not the intention of this. The intention of this is to, when you see those stories and you have that knee-jerk reaction to villainize someone or even to defend someone, look inside and say, why do I feel compelled to do this? And then go a few levels deep, So I feel compelled to do this because this person's wrong and they deserve justice, Well, why do you feel like they deserve justice? Because this was done to me, or, I saw someone do this to someone and I didn't like that person, and, go a few levels deep and get to that point where you're like, I want this because it makes me feel better about myself. Because that's kind of what it is. And yes, it is good to want to stick up for others. And it's good to have some sort of justice because we don't want people running around doing terrible things without repercussions, of course. But there's this really innate drive that we have to put people down for our own self-satisfaction. And I think that's what happens a lot of times, especially in these online spaces where things get really toxic and everything. So, let's refrain from making someone into a god or a devil. Let's also take their advice with a grain of salt, We don't want to be the David Goggins type where we sacrifice everything so we can run 30 miles a day and work out 6 hours a day and stretch 2 hours or whatever his routine is, that's probably not everyone's goal here. And if that is, then okay. But you got to sacrifice family time. You got to sacrifice relationships. You got to sacrifice a whole bunch of stuff to do that if that's what you want. And, think about your priorities here. Is your priority to be exactly like that person in every way? And if so, then that's probably not healthy. We're all individuals, and you can follow someone's, routines and protocols and stuff to a certain extent, but look inside of yourself and see what you want. Don't just follow someone for the sake of following someone. Look at what you want, and then you can find things that serve you in what other people do. Like if there's an artist and you really admire their productivity, you can look at what their day looks like and maybe integrate some of those habits into your day. If you're looking at someone who's really fit in a way that you want to be physically fit, then, you can look at exercises and diet plans and stuff, but don't go whole, apostle on someone, don't make someone out to be your Lord and Savior and follow and hang on every word, especially when you don't know them, especially when it's someone that you only know through a podcast or a YouTube channel or something. Take the good advice that works for you in the context of what you're looking for, and kind of leave it there. Then figure out what that means for you. Figure out your own stuff and approach all this media from not so much like consuming it, but how can it serve you, and that'll help with other aspects of your life too. So where you're not just mindlessly binging content, but you're actively seeking out content for a reason. And I feel like that's kind of how, what I would say, like the golden age of the internet was, when we had AIM, instant messenger, and, there were blogs were popular, and you would kind of seek out information more than just being accosted with it every day. That was before like infinite scroll was invented and all that. Like you would formulate something that you were actually interested in, and then you would search it out, and then you could follow the thread on it, but then it's not just like mindless consumption of, hey, this guy has a new podcast and I'm just gonna listen to it for 3 hours, or a new video on YouTube that was on my feed, or even worse, like all these Instagram reels and TikToks and stuff. Like it's just information accosting you versus you seeking out information from your own perspective and your own needs. And again, I'm guilty of all this stuff too. I wouldn't be able to have this conversation, or I guess this monologue, without struggling with those same things. So again, like anyone you're listening to online, I'm just repeating myself, so this will be the last time I say it, but don't make them into a hero, don't make them into a villain. Try to approach things from your own perspective and fit it within your needs. And if you find yourself getting triggered by something, think about why that is and why you feel that need for like seeking out justice or revenge or whatever that happens to be. And I think that introspection will give you some fruit. It'll be a fruitful search, and you'll learn some cool stuff about yourself. Anyways, hope you are all well, and I'll talk to you next time.